everyone, and this morning I'm welcoming Chris Walsh onto the Zoom room, and he is it CEO, I guess, or manager, or whatever you want to
say CEO or director, or
director of Tutoring and the Talk. So first of all, Chris, could you tell me a little bit more about your company?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with Tutoring then. So Tutoring was set up in 2016. And its core aim is basically just to provide tuition on a private basis for students of all backgrounds, all incomes, to support the education in terms of confidence towards subjects and actually the subject knowledge as well. And it was something that I was really keen to get into because from a personal point of view, I absolutely love teaching. So I was doing it myself, I still do it myself. And it was originally supposed to be a one-man band sort of operation. And then when my capacity just reached the absolute limit, I'm talking 7 days a week, pretty quickly, it then became apparent that I was turning work away. And I was thinking, well, I may as well try and utilize the help of others and turn it into more of a business in that respect. So we grew pretty quickly after that. I think we have about 40 tutors, 50 tutors on the books now. And we cover most of the Northwest. We do have students abroad, we have students down south, but the majority of the students tend to be, at the minute at least, sort of based in Northwest. We then started working with local schools, and then, you know how schools work, word of mouth, they all talk to each other. That sort of spread quickly again across the Northwest, and now we work with loads of different schools, high schools, colleges, primary schools, just helping with small group tuition, one-on-one tuition. A lot of it takes place in the schools, some of it takes place out of the schools, and we just want to kind of keep on growing, see where we get to, and that's kind of that business anyway, still going strong. And then the other business, the Talk, is not, I would say, not officially launched yet, as in the service or the product isn't launched yet. That's set to be launched officially as of sort of next September. And when I say next September, sorry, not the September coming, September 23. September 22 is when we launched the beta sort of program of it. And the Talk is a business that looks at sort of revitalizing or redefining what PSHE education should look like. I think when I was at school, when I go into schools now, and this is nothing against the schools sort of that we work with or that I've had sort of access to, but they'll be the first to admit it's usually not high on the list of priorities. You get your core subjects, maths and English, and then there's a hierarchy of importance within the subjects, and PSHEs usually firmly at the bottom, which I find bizarre. And so it was myself and my business partner sort of got our heads together and said, how can we change this where people are leaving school and saying, oh, well, I know about trigonometry, but I don't know anything about mortgages, or I know about how to label a nucleus in a cell, but I don't know about how to protect myself from cybercrime and things like that. And it was just more the life skills that we wanted to get across, and sort of do it in a way that's more engaging and something that's a bit more modern and relevant. I mean, I was sick and tired at the time of being in education myself, where my form tutor, who was a PE teacher, absolutely lovely lady, but when she was telling us about how to pay our bills, she could have been the most, financially literate person in the whole building, but to us, she was a PE teacher, and that's all we knew her as. So that's all she knew in our minds. So we didn't take it as seriously from that point of view ourselves. So we think that kind of what we're offering will hopefully change that a little bit and give the teachers a bit more time themselves, so they don't have to plan all the resources, which they're not trained to do at the end of the day. I, for example, I've got a biology degree. I tutor maths and science. When I was in schools in mainstream, I was being asked to do PowerPoints for the whole school on things like sex education, drugs, relationships, gang warfare. And I'd be thinking, well, some of these cross over into science, but some of these I don't have a clue about. So I'm researching, am I researching the right things? At what level do I pitch this at? So it's a difficult thing to get right. Now we've got the team, luckily, we've put together, and we've kind of cracked it. At least I think.
Very exciting. Yeah. And I know when I spoke to, I'm a primary teacher, so talking to my year 4 class, at the time talking about mortgages and house prices. So like, well, how much do you think a house costs? They're like, oh, £1,000 maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. It's a bit more than that. They have absolutely no idea about the value of money, and they just, well, they think money comes out of the cash machine. They don't quite understand the process that it takes to get the money into the cash machine to start with.
It's mad because, like you say, it's even in primary schools that when we sort of did this, and we actually hooked up with another business who are actually investing in us, and they've become like joint partners. They originally said, oh, wouldn't it be good to go for colleges? And I completely agree, it would, for the life skills, the money management side of things, and life skills as in transitioning to a fully fledged adult. But the problem was, in a lot of cases, that means that we're going to get 1 or 2 years of the whole spectrum. If we can get people earlier on, then we can affect hopefully many more years in their lives. So primary is something we're certainly looking at, but because of the connections I've kind of already made, because of how I know high schools more intimately, I thought that was the easiest route, or the most viable route for myself or our business to go down. So that's where we're first launching into high schools, and then it will probably trickle down into, in a few years, if it's successful, primary schools, and really trying to tackle it from a grassroots point of view, trying to get it instilled.
Primary schools, PHSE is a bit of an add-on, and my personal view is that the whole thing needs to be interwoven between every other curriculum area. Really, it's not an add-on in order to support the children's social and emotional development. It's something that needs to be in every class, in every lesson, all the time. It's just sort of the way the teacher pays, the teacher speaks, etc. So it's quite easy to get that in there, isn't it? And then just teach those exclusive skills separately where necessary.
Well, we think so. I mean, we're kind of designing this curriculum, but this is the mad thing, by the way, that there is no national curriculum for PSHE. There's a guideline curriculum with broad topic titles, but there's nothing in place. There's no assessments. And I'm not saying necessarily there should be, because it's probably the most subjective subject of all. So it would be extraordinarily difficult to assess. However, there's got to be, I think, a bit more rigidity in it. In terms of schools being held accountable and making sure that they do tick off a bunch of topics that they need to kind of cover. And some schools are brilliant at it already. Some schools are absolutely dire. And again, it's just one of those things where I don't even necessarily blame them, because they're not being held accountable for it. And if you could prioritize more time towards the subjects that are going to affect your grades and your pass rates and all these kind of things, I understand from a head teacher point of view, for example, why they may sort of shift the time towards, or the focus towards, those subjects instead. But as you've said, things like emotional well-being, mental health,
all those the foundations that the academics build on. So without those, you're building on a wall with no foundations, aren't you? Basically, it's just going to crumble eventually.
Well, especially with COVID at the minute, I think it's mad just how many kids and parents, and I've seen it firsthand, and I've heard stories from other people. The sort of students are taking days off now, obviously with anxiety or with stress and with this and that. And I always think maybe I was oblivious to it when I was in school, because I'm sure there was people, with similar feelings back then. I don't think it's just a completely new thing, but I think it's now at least more socially acceptable to talk about it, which is good. Sort of idea of mental health and stuff. But I also do think kids are under a lot more pressure now than even when I was at school, which wasn't decades ago, you know what I mean?
If you didn't make progress in those days, even when I started teaching 20 years ago, if you didn't make progress at the end of the year, we were like, never mind, there's always next year. No one was beating us with a stick over it. So
that's it. Well, it's one of those where, you want to push them to be the best they can be. But there's a limit. Not every kid is going to handle that pressure the same. Not every kid can be motivated in the same way. So
it's not always linear development, is it? Sometimes it's like a small spiral. So
it's crazy. I mean, just to give you an example again of that kind of the craziness of target setting and goal setting and stuff, we used to call it in schools, and you might have done the same thing, flight path. So our learning flight path, and they always give fancy names and jargon titles. But the thing was, we would get the SATs results in from primary school, and obviously our predicted GCSE grades were partly determined by those year 6 test results.
It's not always that accurate, depending on which school it is.
Exactly, and you'll know that firsthand. So we would get a cohort of kids coming in and we're like, oh my God, these geniuses and this. when in reality, we put so much pressure on them by assuming that those grades were reflective. But I think we knew, but it's a case of it's hard to predict what someone's going to get in 5 years' time from year 7 to year 11. So I've never understood the reasoning behind that.
And often also, you know, when they're looking at your value added, they're going to track it from there as well. It's like our year 6 are tracked often from our reception baseline. That's like light years away from their development.
Exactly. It's just bizarre. I remember when I was working in one of the schools, we were told, for example, these are your class sets, these are your class lists in September. These are you'll be working with for at least a year or two if it's GCSE classes. If you are teaching, the bottom sets, they have to be put in for foundation tier, which means old school grade C, nowadays grade 5, absolute top grade they could achieve. And you'd look at their projected grades and their target grades, and it'd be grade 6 or grade 7, or in some cases grade 8, and you're thinking, well, they physically can't get that grade. And then it became a thing where teachers were being scrutinized based on the progress their students made against their target grade. And my argument was always the same. How is it physically possible for me to get this child to a grade 6 when you've already capped them at a grade 5 tops? And so they might be hitting that grade 5. You're not letting me let them get the target grade. And then you're penalizing someone like me for that not being the case. And that was a big gripe that I had. And I appreciate it's difficult to do, and you can't just make it completely bespoke for every single student. But this is one of the reasons why I went into tuition, because we can do that.
That's my next question. What was your catalyst for leaving?
Well, that was it. That was one of the many reasons. So it was a case of, I actually thought I could overall at least do more good in education on a one-to-one or small group basis. It was nothing financially driven at the time. It still isn't, to be fair. I mean, making money is nice, but I really, really did love teaching. And I don't think you go into teaching in the first place if you want to make a ton of money. I think there's other industries that I could have chosen to go into with.
Yeah, talking to my friends, they make more money than I do ever do.
Well, that's it. And teaching isn't a dead lucrative sort of career, but for me, I've always had the sort of belief, you've got one life, enjoy it as much as you can, because it's going to be a very quick sort of thing when you look back at it on your deathbed. And I think if I'd have done it where I had a career where I solely chased money, but didn't particularly enjoy the job, I just don't get it. I have friends that do that. They're in office jobs, they make a ton of money. They don't really get much time to spend it, if I'm being honest, because they're constantly working. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm constantly working. I'm sure you're constantly working. But when it's for something you're passionate about, it doesn't necessarily, and it's a cliche, but it doesn't feel like work. Exactly.
I haven't got a boss. I don't present something and wait for scrutiny. I decide if it's okay or not. So that's a really nice feeling.
Exactly. And so, there were loads of different reasons, really. But I think it was a case of, when you go into education, you see the system itself. You can only have so much of an impact because you're confined within your role as to what you can do, what you can say, what you can teach. Whereas now, for example, if I'm tutoring about stem cells in biology to a GCSE or A-level student, I can go off on a tangent if they ask a question that's not related to the curriculum, but they might have an avid interest in it. And I'll say, well, actually, and it links back to PSHE, actually there's a job title there where you can go and look at this specific aspect that you're interested in. I couldn't have told you that in school and wasted valuable minutes, and I'm constantly clock watching and we've not got time for our plenary, or we need to make sure.
First for lifelong learning is what you want to build in
exactly. So you get to know them on a more one-to-one, like I say, a better level. The rapport's a lot better. I mean, it was one of the strengths that I had. I was never the most academically gifted of all my peers in the departments in schools. So they would have, some of them would have doctorates, PhDs and the like. So by comparison to them, I'm a teacher, with the necessary qualification to teach, but nothing above and beyond like some of those guys had. And that was great for them, knowing all the extra stuff that they did above and beyond what I knew. But for what we needed to know and what we need to teach the kids, obviously we all had the same ability in that respect. But the one thing that I had that I think some of them didn't, and some did obviously, and some were even better than me at this, but I always had the rapport with the kids. Whether it was because I was young, I got into teaching when I was 23. I literally didn't have a gap between school, college, uni. Yeah, that's it. So I've always been in school. I've always
my first teaching practice, when the teacher said sit down, I sat down.
That's it. That's it. It's one of those. I've literally been indoctrinated into education system. I've never really left it. God, that sounds sad, doesn't it? But I enjoy it, and so I never saw the need to. And if I get a job doing that, I was like, brilliant. I was one of those geeks at school that actually really enjoyed school. I'm not ashamed to say it. I think,
you've always got my friends. Transferable skills. So would you say that you had to learn anything from the business side of things extra?
Yeah, I think with the business side of things, obviously you've got the education rooted background. So when going into it, I thought, well, I don't have to fake it till I make it in terms of the service we're providing, but in terms of how you advertise and market and sell that service, that was new to me because of what we just said. I'd never really done a job like that. I'd had part-time jobs working behind a counter or a till throughout college and university, but I'd never done selling, advertising, marketing. And it felt a bit strange promoting myself because I'm someone that, although I'm confident, I don't ever want to come across as cocky. I don't want to say, I'm the best, you should pick me, that sort of attitude. And you have to almost be a little bit like that. You have to be outwardly confident, because if you're not confident in yourself, what does that say to somebody else? They're not going to be confident in you if you're not even believing in your own abilities. But how do you portray that? Well, things like social media. So social media, the website, all the different avenues of marketing and advertising, that was all completely new to me. I obviously had social media, but I'd never really looked at it from a term of a business point of view. And it's strange, I spent so many hours watching YouTube videos of business people trying to give advice or marketing advice and this and that, and I'd take notes and I'd research it, and I'd be up till 2 a.m. just doing all these different things. Some of them you could kind of see straight through. It was just, it's one of those, they don't actually have a business themselves, they're just blagging it to try and make you think they're this Instagram celebrity or whatever. But then there were some things that I found that were really, really useful, and I used them. And then it's just trial and error. I think that's the only thing you can do if you're new to business. It's trial and error. You'll get some things wrong. And I've got my fair share of stories where I didn't quite gauge what I was offering correctly, or I didn't quite market it the right way. But yeah, it's just not being afraid really to have a go. That's what I would say. You do learn a lot more quickly by trying it than by reading a book or watching a YouTube video.
I think a lot of the people that I'm sort of pitching to at the moment and who'll be watching this, they are worried about quitting their jobs and then not having enough money to live on. So just in that transition period, how did you find that?
I was lucky in the respect that I obviously had a full-time job, and I kind of knew that I was going to be leaving that to do this eventually. That was the dream. I always thought, well, if it doesn't work, again, I'm in a fairly lucky position that, I'm in a job that's in high demand, and is within a subject that's in high demand as well. So I wasn't overly worried that I would be able to find another job or a similar job if this, didn't work out. I think
there's a bit of a teacher shortage generally at the moment, isn't there? So
well, that's it. They're begging people to join, in teaching and whatnot. So like I say, I wasn't too worried about that, but it was in terms of making the transition from a financial point of view, I just thought about it several months in advance. I kind of knew from the January maybe that this was going to be my last year in education, and so I just put aside a bit of money for the rainy days almost, in case from the following September it was quite slow or it didn't work, and I could pay the bills and be okay. And then if I needed to, look for either supply work or full-time employment. But to really help, and this is what I would advise other people doing, I was doing the side hustle, so the tutoring, at the same time as working full-time. So I would do my job, get into the school 7:30, 8, work till 3, 3:30, probably leave the building at 4:30, 5, and then I would have students lined up in the evening from 5 o'clock through to 9 o'clock at night. And I did that Monday to Friday. And then I would do the whole day Saturday tutoring. And then Sunday I would have off so that I could mark and plan lessons for school. This is before I had kids, to be fair. So for anyone watching that says, well, I've got kids, this is impossible, you know, I appreciate that might be the case, you know, and maybe you wouldn't do it quite as much. But if you've got the opportunity, or if you've got somebody, a partner, or somebody who can look after kids for a while, even if it's 1 or 2 nights a week, I would strongly advise doing that. The other reason, apart from the financial sense of, you know, having a bit of a buffer in place, was to get the word of mouth out, to get people talking about me as a tutor, or whatever field it is that you choose to go into. And that really did help me, because from the first week in September, when I knew I was kind of going full-time self-employed, I'd already had something like 15 clients that I'd worked with for the previous sort of 6 months. And then they had obviously family and friends and neighbours that they were speaking to, or other members within their family that now were at the age where they were thinking about tuition. And so, yeah, I mean, like I say, within the first month, I had a full timetable, 7 days a week. And I'm talking from 9 in the morning till about 8 o'clock at night, because I wanted to smash it. I really, really wanted to smash it.
Your soul wasn't being destroyed in the process.
No, I mean, it was tiring. It was really, really tiring. And I missed quite a lot of stuff, social events and things like that. But I kind of knew, you know, I was again lucky. I was at an age where I thought, well, I can burn the midnight oil, so to speak, and still get up and feel fresh-ish. And I'll do this until it really becomes a bit more established. So we started taking people on, and there it was. But I think the other reason that I would start doing this alongside your main job is because you might look at it, this self-employed lifestyle, or the job that you think you're going to go into, and think, oh God, I'd love to do that. Especially when I'm sat at the office now and I'm bored out of my mind, or I absolutely hate it, or I'm stressed out, whatever. And you think, oh, it'd be great if I did that. Be my own boss, have no stress. First of all, you have stress being your own boss. Secondly, the job is never exactly as you expect it to be. I wanted to go into tutoring to teach. That's what I enjoy doing. But like we said before, the marketing, the advertising, all the things, like even your taxes and stuff like that, I had to learn everything from scratch. It is a headache, but it's worth it in the end. At least it was for me. But the other thing was, if I'd have done that job part-time and hated it, I'd have gone, oh, thank God I didn't just quit, throw in the towel with that job, throw away my income for something that I thought was like this, you know, golden chalice. And actually it turns out it's horrendous. It's actually worse than what I thought. I would be better off over there. The grass is not greener, that sort of thing. So I kind of just thought, well, I've got to test the waters with it. And I'll tell you what, it's brilliant. Imagine going from teaching where you hardly get to nip to the loo, you know, in between sessions, and you're getting break time detentions or break duties. You do not have a break in that day. And you go from that to, you go from house to house with a nice little drive or gap in between, and you get offered a brew every time you go. I had one family who would try and palm off cooking dinner for me every night. I was like, honestly, I'm fine, don't worry. Going, oh no, have some of this, have some of that. I was like, oh, okay. I had some parents who were saying, you know, do you want to, because it'd be the last session of the day on a Friday, they'd be like, oh, do you want to crack open a beer after this and sit outside? Because you get friends with the family and stuff. And you don't get that appreciation from parents at parents' evenings in schools. Let's put it up, because they don't get to know you. They just hear about you from their child, who might exaggerate some of the things that you say.
30, you can never give them that one-to-one.
Yeah, that's it. It's impossible. So yeah, the lifestyle for me changed dramatically. I became a lot happier. I was a lot less stressed out. Well, proof's in the pudding. I'm still doing it. I'm still enjoying it.
So where can we find you, Chris?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I do have a new website pending. So this website should be due out in about a month or so. That's www.tutorright. There's a double R in the middle there just to confuse people. tutorright.co.uk. The website we've got at the minute is more of like a holding page. It's the interim. It's what we've had from the conception of, you know, the business. But like I say, this new website is going to be a bit more all singing, all dancing, and a bit more, like I said before, a bit more braggy, but in a good way, I hope, to sort of let people know the kind of things that we have done and have achieved, because even though it's not within my nature to boast, it's something that we're actually quite proud of, and I think you should put your achievements up and out there, because it does instill confidence in potential clients, students, and yeah, for the people that work with me, have worked alongside me, it's good for them to get the recognition as well. And that's something I was always keen to do as a boss, having worked under various heads of departments or even managers within local shops.
Sometimes limited skills in dealing with people.
Absolutely. Tell you what, some of the best skills that I learned in terms of people skills came from those part-time jobs. Like anyone, I'm tutoring a lad at the minute who was saying how he's absolutely come out of his shell because he's working behind a bar. And I said, you're forced into that world, but you have to speak to people, you have to listen to stories, you have to, do various things you never would have thought, people you would never have spoken to. And yeah, you do learn how to deal with people a lot quicker. And I think especially when you're working in business, if you can't work with people, you're going to struggle. So if it's not a particular forte of yours, I would definitely advise putting yourself out there as much as you can, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Getting on the phone and speaking to people sometimes is more personal than an email, and trying to get conversations like this, for example, get out there as much as you possibly can, because the more you do it, the more confident you get. And nobody's born with that ability to speak confidently in the first instance. It's a learned skill. That's all I would say. And it does help to promote your business, and hopefully then get you the lifestyle that you're actually after.
Brilliant. Well, it's been lovely talking to you this morning, and I've certainly got quite a few top tips as well for launching my self-employment. So thank you very much.
No, that's all right. Thanks for having me.